Welcome back. Welcome back. Today's episode is a great one. We're getting into the foundations of supplementation. We're talking about quality, and quality of supplements is a massive issue. I'm sure you guys have known this. You've seen the articles, you've seen the posts about how we have to make sure that what is supposed to be in our supplements is there and what is not supposed to be in our supplements is not there. So that's what we're delving into this episode. Thank you for lifting us up the ranks, folks. We're once again, the podcast is ranking number 1 in nutrition in all of the United States. And that's thanks to you, my listeners. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here. Please make sure that you keep leaving us reviews when you're feeling inspired and you have a spare minute on whatever platform you're listening to the podcast on. And of course, if you want to connect directly with me, head on over to natnidham.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. I have a peptide specific one if that's the kind of thing you're into. And of course, you can always check out my membership community because that's where I do live Q&As for the group on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, I'm doing one tonight. I have subject matter experts coming in. Like, for example, last week, we had an amazing session with Ian Mitchell from Wizard Sciences, who came into the group and answered people's questions live. So lots of fun things going on over there. Joining me today is Oliver Amdrup-Chamby, an industry leader who's been setting new benchmarks for supplement quality for over 15 years. He launched the first CrossFit gym in Denmark, helped grow the sport across Europe, and then co-founded Puori with one goal: to create the cleanest fish oil and protein on the market. In this conversation, we explore what's really going on in your omega-3 supplements and protein powders, why oxidation matters, how batch level testing works, and what to look for the next time you reach for protein powder. Oliver left us with a sweet deal: 20% off a one-time purchase of Puori protein, or if you choose the already discounted subscription, you get almost a third off the price. Just visit puori.com/nat and use promo code NAT. And to spell Puori, it's Puori. And if you're wondering where that crazy name comes from, it's actually a blend of 2 words that define this brand: pure and organic. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome to the show, Oliver Amdrup-Chamby. It is a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for being here, even though it's far away.
Far away. Well, I know it's the beauty of technology.
It
right?
is, yeah.
And I'm excited for this conversation because this is a somewhat different topic for the podcast, but I think we're going to talk about some issues today that are so important in the industry that we're in, and often are misunderstood and not talked about. And so we're going to talk about 2 things that are critically important. One of them, we're going to talk about the supplement industry and how do consumers really navigate this world of what is actually in the supplements that they're using. And I think that's one of the pain points that really got you into the business that you're in. And I'm going to invite you to share about that. And we're also going to talk about protein, because I think that, protein as a topic has gained a lot of traction over the last little while. And some people would say too much. So I think it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting topic for us to unpack together, given
for sure
your
for
world.
Sure. Yeah.
So Oliver, you're in Denmark, and so you're over there, and we were just talking about Danish society and how it's super regulated and very different than North American. Is that kind of is that part of what might have moved you into this space a little bit?
I think it's interesting because I think I'm a little bit like I'm probably very American for a Danish person, which is interesting too. But I've also lived in California for many years, and my wife has family in US, so we spend a lot of time there. Also, obviously, for what we do with Puori. But I think Denmark, there's like what I'm trying to do always is take the best from kind of every situation. And in Denmark, there's definitely a lot of regulation that makes sense. Like we have a lot of things that works really well. Some is a little over-regulated on the supplement side too. I'll say that. I'm also in the industry, obviously, but some things, we could push that faster a little bit. Like we could push that faster forward if it wasn't as regulated. That being said, I like the idea of having some guardrails that can really protect consumers. And that's what we've tried to create in the supplement industry, because that started out as our own like personal issue of like, just consuming supplements. So, yeah. And I maybe that's kind of a starting point into, why did we actually get into it? And it started out with the idea like that everybody was telling us, if you're taking like omega-3 fatty acids on a daily basis, make sure that it's pure and clean because it's come from fish. And, fish can be polluted, whether it's from the oceans or, even in processing or whatever it is. Just make sure that's something everybody can agree on. And I always say this, we kind of coming out of the fitness and wellness industry, spending kind of all my adult years in that industry, coming out, nobody could actually agree on anything on the fitness and wellness industry on kind of what was the best route to a healthy life, whether it was like choices of diet or choices of training regimen or choices of, whether it's CrossFit or yoga or whatever. There's so many good routes to a better health outcome for sure, but there's no one size fits all. But the interesting part was when we were talking in this, in environmental contaminants, like, there's nobody saying, oh, you need a little more lead in your diet or you need more mercury in your fish. Everybody was saying, make sure when you take something that's highly concentrated out of nature, that it's clean and pure. And, that's where it started for us. We were just like consumers at the point saying, maybe a little nerdy consumers, we'll get that. But we was like, that's a data point. We must be able to measure how much actual contamination is in the fish oil. So we went to the stores, we went to where we could buy, fish oil at the time this is 2007 ish. And we were like, let's buy the products and ask them to get like these different data points, especially on the heavy metals, the PCBs, dioxins, some of the other things that we more commonly found in fish. And no brands would give us this data. So I was like, that's interesting. We had like, it was almost impossible to get. Most people like big question marks when we asked for it. And especially like even through pharmacies or the stores or whatnot, they were like trying to send us on, but we really didn't get any, credible third party data on anything we could use. So we thought that's pretty interesting. Here's something that in this wellness industry, everybody agrees on. And everybody says when you're consuming something on a daily basis, make sure it's clean and pure. We even here in the Nordics, coming back to the Nordics, we have recommendation of, let's say, not eating too much fish if you're pregnant, because we know there's a lot of, heavy metals in farm, like not even farm fish, but farm fish and wild fish.
Yeah, both. Really,
both, right? Salmon, tuna, whatever it was, like, try to avoid that, go small. Like there's a lot of guidance, but in the fish oil, there was none of that, which is a data point. So that's how we actually said, there must be a brand out there who want to just share this data first and center on a batch level. And that's how we got started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the fish oil conversation is really interesting, right? Because I think that I mean, there's two pain points with fish oil. One is the heavy metals and the contaminants, as you say. I mean, as the oceans get more and more challenged with environmental contamination, now they're talking about microplastics being an issue, and but even the farmed fish, even the landlocked farm, like, it's an industry that is under so much pressure
for sure.
From all sides, that it's, and as you say, when you're creating a supplement from a food, you're now concentrating what's in that food. And so, right. And so
the good and the bad, right? So
both the good and the bad. Exactly. So on the, have you done any research? I'm just curious, actually, because the microplastic conversation is starting to really take hold, and certainly in the oceans, it's an issue, right? There's that like continent or country of plastic in the middle of the ocean.
Definitely. And we're doing some testing now on it. It's one of the things where we actually haven't found too much in the finished product.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting. But it's definitely something, it's a route we are going down it because consumers are asking us this much. But we rely a lot on what Clean Label Project or IFAS or these bigger, certification groups that are actually understanding the risk of contamination more than it shouldn't be us as a brand that are directing it. But consumers should definitely, if there's some knowledge out there, push in the direction. And then we will lean on like the big organizations like Clean Label Project and so on and say, whatever you say is up at like potential risk, we should have that in what we call our transparency report. So, and right now it's not in those reports, microplastics. There's a lot of things that we find in fish, or we potentially could find in fish that's in that report, but microplastic not yet. But I think the consumer is pushing it that way. But again, with the very sporadic testing we've done, we haven't seen that issue yet in our product. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds, because it could have something to do with the fact of the processing. Processing may remove the microplastics, even, or it may not be.
When you concentrate the omega-3s out of the flesh and so on. Yeah, there can definitely be something into that. I think when we talk about omegas, there's actually the key things to be, looking out for is obviously on the environmental toxin side, it's the heavy metals and the PCBs and dioxins and so on that is found in the oceans. Those are things to be. But the other side, which tend to be a little bit forgotten, I say there's three components that make a great omega-3 product. One is active ingredients. That's EPA, DHA, which sounds like a surprise, but there's so many products on the shelf that has very limited amount of the actual active ingredient. And that is the one that will that's why you're taking the capsule in the first place.
Correct.
So active ingredient, the absence of heavy metals and PCBs and dioxins. And then the last one that's tend to be forgotten, which is probably one of the hardest components, that's the oxidation or the freshness of this product.
I was actually going to,
So, and that's really where I think when we test other products and see other batch reports like out there, that's really where there's small optimization all the way through the chain in order to make sure that end capsule that the consumer is consuming has the lowest amount of oxidation at the time it's being consumed. And that can be transportation, it can be how you encapsulate, it can be, the price of the fish, it can be how fast they do it. So there's so many components in creating what I would say is a pure and clean, fresh product with a high dose of EPA, DHA, and other omega-3 fatty acids.
Yeah, well, and I think the oxidation is such an interesting piece of it, because people often talk about, I can't take fish oil, I get fishy burps, which is, it's one thing to take the oil, but then when it's repeating on you through the morning, it makes for a very unpleasant. So really, even someone who likes fish is just like, well, no, that's not over. It's a different process, but it's the part of that is the oxidation. I think, as a nutritionist, I think part of that also is a lot of people don't make enough stomach acid. Their food is sitting in their stomach. They're not breaking it down properly. That can be part of the problem. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the oxidation of the product is also very much a piece of it.
It's a huge piece of it. So I think because with ours, we recommend like a very potent dose, which is like 3 capsules of 2,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acid. It's quite a lot.
That is a lot.
And I think if the fish oil wasn't like extremely pure and fresh, you would feel that. You would feel that right away, especially with such a dose. There can also be something on how you're taking it. Like we often recommend taking it with food and not on an empty stomach, glass of cup of coffee or something like that, which will help dissolve the gelatin faster. But, you might feel that faster because it is fish. So it will have, as I say, it shouldn't be fishy, but you should if you're eating sushi at a sushi restaurant, you'll taste the fish, but it shouldn't be like, it's stuck in your mouth afterwards. And that is often freshness. And again, it's a marker that you can actually measure in a lab. And that should be measured in the finished product. We see a lot of brands that are sharing their raw oil data. But you really need somebody like the IFAS, International Fish Oil Standards, to be able to go in and look for that TOTOX score, which is the total oxidation in the oil. And you are looking for different markers in there. Most brands would be aiming to get around 20. I think IFAS standards is probably around 16 is their maximum limit. Some standards are closer to 30. I'll guess that there's a lot of products out there that has a 50, 60 of oxidation. And our goal is normally to be around 6, 7. And if you look at IFAS, you can go in and look at all the different products in there. And if you can find a product that get down in that, especially in a capsule product, because capsule is more stable when you open it because it doesn't get exposed to oxygen. But if you think of a liquid, you might have a fairly fresh oil at the beginning because you're not putting it into small capsules where it will be exposed to oxygen, but you're putting it into one bottle. in that bottle, unfortunately, when you open it, it
Yeah.
is exposed to oxygen. And we've tried different packaging and so on. We actually now mixing it with a little bit of MCT oil because that actually slows oxidation we see in our heat trials. So it's not as concentrated, but it becomes more stable. And again, the goal is for you, for me, for our families and so on, when they consume the product, it's still fresh. So
Yeah.
that's the goal.
So do you have fish oil not in capsules, like in a bottle?
We do have a liquid fish oil as well.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
so
missed that.
we've
Okay.
we've we've actually, yeah, we it's been probably a little on and off because it's been a hard one for us to keep. It's been more in on the European side
Okay.
than the US side. And again, like we actually do recommend capsules more often because of the we can't control what's going on in your kitchen, in
Yeah.
your home, or where you're keeping it.
Yeah.
And honestly, when you look at these trials of oxidation from when you open fish oil, it goes like incredibly fast. It's like an exponential increase in oxidation. So I would personally use it within like 14 days ish.
Yeah.
It will last longer, but I would personally keep it as cold as possible, fridge, even freezer.
Yeah.
But yeah, like again, it's more convenient. I'm more certain that the end user is getting a higher quality product if they actually keep it the capsules. So
100%. And especially when you're taking a supplement to manage, things like inflammation and protect the brain and feed the brain and do all the things that we know that omegas are so critical for, the last thing you want is something that's been
that's rancid.
corrupted,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like that's something
It's
that's rancid. It's actually going to go against you. You're almost
it
better off not taking it.
exactly. It's very counterintuitive, and I think we like based on like let's say the longevity toolbox of what are the different supplements that you can add to your diet where you really get bang for your bucks. I think omega-3 is really high on that list from like every major respected longevity expert, functional doctor, nutritionist, and so on, right? Like it's one of the staple five, I would say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's also where we say like Puori as a brand are very focused on doing the common uncommonly well, like taking
Yeah.
these like basic products that is basically a simple raw ingredient and just see how based on data how fresh pure can we keep this at the end of the day. So
Yeah. The EPA is, and everybody knows DHA is really good for the brain. Do you want to talk about EPA a little bit? I mean, it's so funny. We're talking a lot more about fish oil than I thought we were going to here, but,
So
but
I'll
I
say a
think that
little bit, and then
EPA is the
maybe
forgotten. Yeah.
there's so based out of I'm being based out of Copenhagen, Denmark, and that means that what we can say on EPA, DHA, and so on is fairly regulated.
Right.
So I think what we've seen in general is just maybe EPA looks more on the body inflammations and other stuff, and DHA is more brain. I
Yeah.
think the body can also convert one to the other, but like it's not like I would say, you need the EPA for this, but what we've seen in the past, especially with dealing with people that were very physically active and so on, like it's important to also get a good prominent dose of EPA. And that's also why we have more EPA than actually DHA in the product. So
Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that in the better supplements, and have advised when I was coaching people, was definitely talking to people about those issues. Okay. So we're good on the fish oil. And fish oil is one of the ones that I think a lot of people know they have to be careful with. Like, as you said, before you even started in this industry, it was the one supplement that people will say to you, oh, well, if you're going to take fish oil, make sure it's good quality, make sure, and with the issues, like we said, with the issues of fish and contamination of fish, it's becoming hard to even get people to eat fish these days
it is,
for all
yeah.
those reasons. But then we move into the world of protein, which is the other big piece of the puzzle, right?
Oh,
In the
for sure.
human diet. And protein has become a big topic. And it's funny because we're going to extremes, right? We've moved from a world where people are understanding that for the most part, they're probably not getting quite enough protein in their diet. To now people overdoing protein in the diet. And I just saw an article not that long ago in a mainstream paper that talked about, people are now eating so much protein that it's becoming a negative. And in my mind, it depends on the individual. It depends on their activity levels. It depends on their age. It depends on so many different things. Do you want to talk to that a little bit? Because I think that, protein's a big piece of the business that you're in. And let's just start with the foundational issue first.
For sure. And I think like protein, as we are talking, it's one of the like the big key macronutrients, and where we get a lot of the amino acids into our diets that are, good for, our body and so on. And I think for good reason, protein is getting some attention, because I think if we look at the average Western diet, it is very carb forward and it is just like full of these, different type of grains and, easy soluble carbs and so on, like that you're like consuming processed food, ultra processed food and processed food and so on. But I think for good reason, we've maybe neglected of how much protein does it actually take to keep that muscle mass as we age as well. Like if you're talking longevity, which I think we are seeing more and more data and facts on how critically important that is for almost any marker of health if we like starting to lose muscle mass. So I think for that reason, and when we look at whether it's like the more high protein diets, I would recommend at least 1 gram per pound of body weight, or even 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. Like I often listen to, Dr. Gabriel Lyon, who is, really strong into the protein space, and, just doing a good job of talking about like the different ratios and what are you trying to aim for? Are you building muscle? Are you, just maintaining? Are you losing weight? Because then you want to go lower, maybe it's 0.8 or 0.75. But I think the average ratio was, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, and it might vary a little bit from region to region, but it's probably something like 0.5 or 0.4.
Oh, it's way low.
Yeah. It's so we still have a role of increasing that gap, that nutrient gap of protein that's been created, where that is by, and I always say that, preferably first by foods, right? Like, so high quality foods, and that's where you should get your protein from, whether that's egg, fish, meats. I'm not against that either. I think quality over quantity matters, and, quality in the farming practices from, health of the planet, health of the animal matters, but also from the quality of protein at the end of the day, and nutrient density and so on, it matters. But I think if you start measuring, let's just say for our thought experiment here, that we are aiming at 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I would need to consume 185 gram of protein. And when I write that down, how much food that actually is, it's a freaking lot of food. And, and I think that sometimes can be hard. And that's where the convenience of a protein powder comes in play in that industry, and why it has a reason to exist and why we can work with it. A second part of that is actually the actual amino acids. So the protein is broken down by a lot of different amino acids. But when we look at, let's say, amino acids in certain plants versus certain meats versus protein powder, we actually see that like a whey protein powder has a really strong profile of these branched chain amino acids that we're looking to get. And like it's easy bioavailable, meaning the body can easily absorb it. Dr. Lyon was doing this. I read that in her Forever Strong book, and I saw it at her event recently. She was doing the explanation of saying, okay, let's say that, you're getting like your proteins from plants, but let's say they're generally half as bioaccessible in the type of amino acids you're getting. You might need to do all over 360 grams of protein coming from these plants. And that is a lot of plants. Like try to eat that through beans and different things. It's going to be really, really hard. So I think from that perspective, it totally has a role to play in the convenience and like hitting these protein goals. But again, protein goals should be individual, and it should be, you can definitely overconsume it as well. We've seen that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think, bioavailability of protein, of those amino acids is critical. I think there's also the nutrients that are coming with those amino acids that you're going to get from, and we'll talk about whey protein in particular, because whey protein to the athlete or to a physically active person or someone whose goal is to build muscle has some particular attributes that are building attributes, if you will.
The leucine,
I think, exactly. And I think that that I think that one of the things that's I mean, the other big trend right now with all of these people who indeed are losing weight effectively using GLP-1 agonists, right? This whole new category of drugs that actually work really well. You mentioned maybe you don't need as much protein if you're losing weight, but actually I think the counter to that, especially if you're using these products, you actually need more protein because the body will catabolize muscle in
And
an
that's
effort to just
exactly,
drop.
but that's the other part of it. So one thing is just losing weight, but you don't want to lose too much muscle mass either,
You don't
right?
want to
So
lose ideally you want to lose as little. You will, depending on how overweight the person
sure,
starts, they will lose some muscle.
for sure.
And that's, that I think the media loves that line. They're like, oh my God, you take a GLP-1, you're going to lose your muscle. And it's like, well, yes, if you sit on the couch and, and eat your favorite muffins and donuts, realizing that, I can eat a muffin and a donut and not gain any weight. This is like nirvana.
Exactly. But you will lose your muscle mass and your ability to live life over time if you just sit on your couch.
Yeah.
So I think that coupled with everything else, the physical activity, the good quality diet, you can't supplement your way out of it. You can't, probably drug your way out of it, or either way. You need to do stuff still.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's a good point to be aware of, especially when you start not having appetite and not getting as much food in. It can again be a way to get those, let's say, those key amino acids that you can get easily out of whey protein to minimize that, like muscle loss. But again, you got to move, right? So
move your body.
Yeah.
No, and I think whey protein is interesting because it hits a very sweet spot in the human diet, in the sense that, and you mentioned this, it's easier for us to break down and assimilate. It doesn't take as much work. We're in a world where so many people have compromised digestion, like they're not producing enough stomach acid or whatever the case may be. Meat becomes a very difficult food to break down. It's also a hard food, as you said earlier, to meet those protein goals because it's so satiating and it's so filling, but you also have to eat a lot of it to get what you need. And which is not to say we should stop eating meat and just take whey protein. I think both play an important role, but particularly for, it's just like I've worked with, when I was working with people one-on-one, like whether it's students who are rushing out the door in the morning and you can't get them to eat anything, or even a young child, right? If you can give them a milkshake in brackets, and get them to drink that, and you can throw in a couple of extra things in there. That's a beautiful way to start to anchor your day, kind of thing.
Totally. So we use that hack quite a lot at home as well. So we have kids, and just again, back to like all the foods accessible out there, or if associated with fun, is carb forward, right? It's sugars based. It's like, do your grandparents take your kids out for waffles and pancakes in the morning, or take them out for steak and eggs, right? It's not happening, right? Like everything is associated in the other way around. So we also try to do that. And you can actually be surprised how many good, like broccoli, like heavy nutrients, and even spices, like ginger, cinnamon, different things you can add into a protein shake with especially the vanilla based ones are really good at kind of messing it up, and it tastes pretty damn good too. So you get to increase that protein content, and we actually play that into foods too, because another thing you can't get around when having kids is like something like an oatmeal or overnight oats or something like that. We add eggs to our oats and protein powder. So we try to again level up the protein in the morning to get closer to like a decent dose of protein from the first meal. So it's not just a sugar spark, right? Because obviously they get fresh fruit and different things that are nice. But again, and there's tons of good nutrients in that as well. Yeah. But I think it is hard to get that in. So protein powder can be used for that too. We make protein buns, which are actually really nice. So you can actually pack 12 to 15 grams of protein in a bun, and in a bun. Yeah. And it's basically just egg, cottage cheese, protein powder. If we call it power buns or monster buns at home, we add spinach because then it become green, and then, grounded oats basically. That's it.
Yeah.
And in the oven. And you blend that up and you mix it and you suddenly have like a fairly low carb, fairly high protein. There's still fibers and carbs and so on in.
No, but
That's
you're going to
great.
get some good stuff in there.
But yeah, and you can actually make a sandwich that has like close to 20 grams of protein in it, and compared to, let's say, the classic white bun where it will not be that.
It'll be void. Actually, I'm going to get that recipe from you.
It's
the protein bun. I think that would be kind of a fun thing to make.
It is kind of fun, and it is a little drier, and sometimes a little baking soda can get a little bit more fluffy. You can play around with things, but like if you consume them fairly quickly. The other day we actually did them for burger night at home, so we did these and we tried to make them super flat. We did have like the funny part was like, okay, it was like, this is so dry, so we got to use more ketchup, Dad. So so they got a lot of ketchup in, and we laughed. It was like that's a okay substitute here, but stuff like that. You can mix it in, and you want to do that as well, because that's a way to increase what is normally more, let's say, a more carbohydrate forward meal, whether it's like the bun, the oats, the different things, the smoothies. Like that's where it's a really, really nice add-on to increase protein intake.
Yeah. Well, I've been known to, I mean, there's have you ever met Joel Green?
Joel Green? No.
No. So he's a really interesting guy, and he's a huge advocate of a very varied diet. He created an eating plan for people. And one of the meals that he'll anchor people with will be like a protein shake, and you'll put even raw oats in there in your blender. And because of the fiber that you get from the oats, and obviously you're using organic, non-sprayed, non-GMO oats, because oats have their problem. And I actually think that's going to get us to the next part of our conversation.
Sure.
But putting protein powder into even oatmeal, like I'll do that. I'll make my oatmeal, and I don't eat oatmeal often, but if I have a heavy lifting day and I know I want a recovery meal on the other side of it, I will sometimes make oatmeal, and I'll throw my protein powder into the oatmeal, and it melts beautifully and makes for the best oats ever.
It does, even overnight oats, cold, warm, like it's really cool. My wife is also doing it in her Greek yogurt. So it's like adding that like protein scoop in the green yogurt, and then berries and, almond butter or whatever on top. It's delicious. It even like give it a little bit of like vanilla flavor to it as well. So yeah, you can definitely work it, but also even just like as in water after a workout, it's a simple way to add it up like on the go. And that's why it has a reason to exist. But because again, if we could, we would get the vast majority from food. I think that is, but
well, I think of whey protein kind of as a food, right? I think it's somewhere in the middle between and if you look at protein bars these days, they're becoming mysteriously closer and closer to candy bars as we go. Even as a matter of fact, Snickers and Mars are making protein bars.
Oh, for sure. Because protein is a buzzword too.
How much do we trust them?
Yeah.
I think not, right? So, but let's talk a bit about the fish oil conversation around toxins and contaminants is I think it's pretty obvious to people, right? People understand the environment's under siege but with protein powders, I think that it's really in the last few years that we've started talking about protein powders also potentially being a source of toxins and heavy metals and contaminants. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's really a big part of what you guys do.
And it's a really big part of what is being consumed out there. So I think that's where we should really pay attention to try to do something better. So I think if we look at the recent category study done by the Clean Label Project here, just last few months ago. But anyway, that study tested 83% of America's household products, so very representative. I think it was 160 different SKUs and products that they tested. So you get a good idea of what's in. It's not just 5 or 10 different products and brands that has gone through a laboratory. It's really 83% of what Americans have access to. In that study, 47% of them should actually be sold with a warning sticker. Meaning that they do not meet Proposition 65 standards for heavy metals. So that's, like flipping a coin on the protein powder you're consuming. One serving of that protein powder will be above that. And if we drill one step deeper, it was very clear to see that plant proteins, the number increased significantly. I think we were up to 77 or 79%, or something like that. So but let's say above 75% of the plant proteins were testing above proposition 65. Many of them for lead. And it's a really horrible, heavy metals to get into your body. So there's definitely something to be done here. And then when we looked at the flavoring component, there was also some clear takeaways. Cacao, which we know, unfortunately, again, for having worked with cacao and from what we've seen in other studies as well, cacao bean is really good at, removing stuff up from the soil. And unfortunately, we see cadmium, lead again come in. So if you are taking a plant-based cacao protein powder smoothie, it is I would guess probably closer to 90% of you are getting above proposition 65 recommendations of these toxic metals. So it's a issue we need to address to fix. And I'm saying that's what one recommended serving is. I've worked with athletes in the past in the gyms and so on that were taking 5 servings a day. Yeah. You're literally putting yourself at a point. And some will say proposition 65, they're super strict. They're the standard out there. Yeah, they are super strict and it is a standard, but we can again go back to, you cannot find any specialist in heavy metals or functional nutrition saying, there's a safe level of lead. No. It's something that you really want to try to avoid as much as possible. Let's use the proposition 65 as the standard because that's the one now set. That's one of the stricter. How can we comply to get below that? And we've had those issues in production and so on as well. We've had to create a different system of sourcing cacao beans because we also have a whey cacao protein. So we've also seen the cacao beans come in even from the same, high quality organic farmers. We still see these high levels of cadmium and lead especially.
And so this is and I think, the question people are going to ask is, well, where's all this coming from? And it's coming from the soil, right?
From the soil.
And it's bioaccumulating in the cacao fruit, which is tragic. It's bioaccumulating in the animals when we're talking about animal protein. And it's bioaccumulating in plant
in
matter.
The plant, in the peas, in the rice, in whatever is used for the plant protein.
Right? Peas is really bad.
It depends a little bit. I think actually what we've seen now, we also have a pea protein and we always live up to the different standards, but the proposition 65 standards. But what we've seen is pea tend to actually do a little bit better than when we've looked at other plant proteins.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, at least that's our we've been through a lot of different, and our team has been through a lot of different, farmers and tested. And again, we can find from the same, so we classify in our internal classification, pea as a super high risk of contamination ingredient. So we would have to do a pre-test of the raw material before we start working with it, even from the same lot, from the same year, from the same farm. We have to test it before we mix it because we will, and this in the same we've seen in cacao. So that's why I will say if you don't have any data, and again, back to this is data points. We're talking about something that is simple. There's some lab reporting involved in it, but it's a simple data point where we could go in and say, like we're now starting to see in baby food with the AB 899 coming out of California, where you need to actually prove the actual heavy metal content in your baby food. It came from the same. It started probably from the same third-party testing that Clean Label Project did in baby foods, which were, propelled around a lot of different organizations doing testing in baby food, found, crazy amounts of different heavy metals in baby food products. They were able to create this safety system in place now so that you actually have to have that, traceable data point. So you can see if you're the mother or father giving this baby food to your kid, at least the heavy metal content if you're in California right now. But my point is, that can be done if we have a category where 47% is polluted.
Yeah.
We need that type of regulation in that category or, transparency. So that's something that we've been working with the Clean Label Project since 17, 18-ish, I would say. When they did their first category study, we saw kind of the same, tendencies as we're seeing right now in the protein category. Might even gotten a little worse on the heavy metal side since 18 on the new study.
We would expect that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the planet is not getting treated better and better and better, meaning, we'll see more and more stuff, whether it's the microplastic, the PFAS, the heavy metals, all the different things we're doing. We will see that sneak in, and we, as the brands, the regulation, the governments, the third parties as Clean Label, we can put certain things in place, like what we created with the Clean Label project, and still now, that many years later, a lot of brands are getting Clean Label certified, which is great because they go in and validate the supply chain. They do like random testing of the products that the brands have on shelf. But knowing these high risk products still is out there, we need, in my opinion, at least on the ones that are so high risk of contamination, like a transparency code, like the QR code that we've added to the product, where you can scan every single batch of every single product and find that, okay, I can make an educated choice as a consumer, as a mom, as a father, as an athlete, that I will want to, minimize X in my, here's what's actually in. This is what they found in this batch I'm standing with.
Yeah. And batch testing, I think, is huge. And I think you brought up a really good point. And it's funny, I was at a mastermind event last week, and one of the business leaders who was there was talking about the future of, food, not even just the supplement industry, but the future of serving consumers something that they're going to consume lies in full transparency. Like, this guy's even putting cameras in on his production lines that people can access on his website. Like, it's
That's
transparency
cool.
from the beginning of harvesting whatever it is that you're serving, right through to when the product is bottled and sitting on a shelf waiting for someone to pick it up. And what you said about batch testing is so critically important, because as you just mentioned a minute ago, even in your case, you're getting product from someone you think is doing everything right. And from one batch to the next, there's been a change in the composition.
Especially because there's still not, like, there's no regulation or rules in place for them to have to test that in their end. So like, before we get that, like we will find it will for us be like a little bit of a, scan and miss and see what's in there to actually figure out. And that coming back to, there's ways that these products can be contaminated. Most of it comes from the raw ingredient. So that's obviously where it starts. But there's also potential different contamination in production and packaging that can come later and so on. So I think it's where, if the end consumer, and some people will say we've gone really far out there and saying, like, if you take our, like, a bag of protein and just kind of run that through the lot, and you scan the QR code on the back, you would be able to find a lab test on, the actual protein content. So is there a protein that puts on the label? That's a good starting point. Is there protein in your protein? I think with protein, but you'll be surprised when we get to capsules on, like, label accuracy. It's pretty crazy. But anyway, if there's protein in, next step, is there any pesticide residue, antibiotics, heavy metals, residual solvents, and bisphenols? Those are the things that we would see on this. This might not even be the same lab testing it, but the Clean Label project is then, sourcing that out there, so to speak. So there's different labs that are specialists in testing for the different things, glyphosate and so on. And you would be able to scan that code and go to the Clean Label project's website, find that actual batch number, and see exactly what was of these different ingredients in there. So was or was not supposed to be there. Yeah. So, and I think when we can do it, we're like a fairly small brand. And I was just looking up here prior to jumping on this, just looking up on the latest on the Clean Label Project's website, and I just took the latest dark chocolate batch to see, it came out. It was uploaded, I think, 12th of May. So it's a really reason back. Okay, we don't release anything if it doesn't really live up to our standards. So it's not released from our inventory before there's an actual lab report out there. So, so you won't be in doubt with us. But I'm still curious to see the difference, because I know with cacao beans, there will be something. So, and we trace fairly low, like to low doses way beyond Proposition 65. So I can see, how was this cacao? And I was like pretty impressed with the latest one. It had a really low lead and cadmium profile and non-detected in the others. So I was like, okay, I can actually, if I eat this batch at home, I can probably do 3 servings now. Like, there's no risk for me of like doing more, because I have the data. And I think I was a little excited, obviously call me, but I was going through, and there was like 79 different lab reports out there right now on protein powder. So it is a lot of testing, people say, and you spend a lot of money on giving that test, but it gives the credibility and the knowledge for the end consumer so they don't have to be in doubt. Don't just trust marketing or branding or whatnot. Trust the data point as much as possible. So I was like, when we're like this small, because we are small, and this is a $10 billion category, and the big players are huge, right? Like we are a tiny player. I think it shows that we should have other brands be able to do the same.
Mm-hmm. So certainly the big brands, if they put the intention behind it, and there are brands. I mean, the nice thing is the Clean Label Project, I think, is once you put it out there that there's a better way to do things, the responsible brands will step up.
I totally agree. So I'm a big believer that most of these brands don't know the actual they don't know the content of potential heavy metals in most of their products because it's not something you're mandatory testing for. So how would you actually, assuming that most of the ingredients are good and clean. So I think, again, if we put, the first thing you need to do is put some transparency on it. And that's why we need these organizations that are not fear-mongering, but, creating data points on certain categories. I really enjoyed one thing of that latest study they came out with as well. That was that it showed that from the last study to this study, they found almost no bisphenols in the products.
That's interesting. So where are the biphenyls coming from? Is that the packaging?
It's the packaging. So they their conclusion in that was the packaging manufacturers really stepped up and said, okay, we got to remove BPA, BPS, and what are the different bisphenols that they were testing for and or they were using, and that's a promising thing, and that's where we hope that these data points will drive that industry, and I certainly believe it will. Drive people forward.
Well, and I think as the consumer is given better options, they're going to choose. They have the opportunity to choose the better option
for sure. And then brands is coming along, right? Because
pardon.
And then brands are coming along, right? Because that's how it works, right?
Yeah, it's pushing and pulling.
It is
along the way. All right, so there's it's funny. I just this episode won't have come out not the episode I'm going to refer to now will not have come out yet when we release your episode, but I interviewed a guy. His name is Ben Katz, and goes by the mass spec guy, and he's one of these guys that will take a product and throw it in a mass spectrometer to see what he finds, and it's sometimes very fascinating what he finds. And one of the things he said to me that is, and I think people generally know this, but whenever you see flavors or fragrance on the back of a product, that's the bucket you actually want to dig into. That's because in so many cases, that's where manufacturers that are not good citizens, if you will, get to hide the things that nobody wants to be consuming. And I think this brings us to how many ingredients are actually in your product and what are you putting in there? So we've dealt with the metals and the toxins, but now it's even the things that are right under your nose can present a challenge.
For sure. And I think, again, here's where there's also some difference on European regulations and American regulations. For example, natural flavor, use that as an example. In natural flavors coming out of Europe has to come from natural origin. It's not an altered or changed substance in any way. It has actually, when we are using a natural flavor, it comes from concentration of vanilla. So it's it's more like a concentrate. So, and we're hearing that more and more as we actually go into Europe because people are like, whoa, there's natural flavors. That should be horrible. It could be potentially, it could also be good, but let's unfold it. So as you said, let's double click it and see what's underneath. And I think so that's one component of flavoring, because for most people, they do not want an unflavored edition. If they're consuming it on a daily basis, they need to have some kind of flavor. We try to make that, as you said before, as close to something that's original in flavor, coming from a natural source. So a real natural source. So vanilla, as an example, coming from real vanilla beans from Madagascar, quality, there's actually vanilla seeds in there. So it's really,
you can see it. There's little brown
you can see all the specks in there. So there's actually a decent dose of real vanilla in there to be part of, to be the majority part of the flavoring component. And then I think there's a second thing that's really interesting, and that is the sweetening component, because obviously it needs to have some kind of flavor to it. If you do no sweetener in it, it's harder to, let's say, add to the smoothie, do that on the go. but you don't need a lot, and you can do it in different ways. We've decided to go with a little bit of organic coconut sugar, and there's in a serving there's 3 grams. And just to break that down, in a banana, probably 25 grams on an average banana. So like, or an apple is 23, 24 grams, depending on. So it's a bite of a banana or a bite of an apple. That's the amount of organic coconut sugar. But that means we do not have to use a lot of, like, we don't use monk fruit or any of the other like natural sweeteners. In our natural flavor, there's concentrated vanilla and a little bit of stevia in the flavor. So there's actually a little bit there, but you can't even measure it like the way you would measure stevia on a product. So people won't taste this as there's like a stevia in it. So you get with that actual coconut sugar sweetener and the real vanilla, you get this almost little burnt vanilla, like real flavor of a really high quality creme brulee or something like that. So, and milk from whey protein, those things are actually really synergistically in the taste preference. It comes out really nice. So I think we can get most kids and adults to even enjoy, even with water, like the protein powder.
It's an exceptionally clean taste, and it's the best way for me to describe it. When I first tried it, I was really blown away, and I think that it's one of the few products on the market. Like, even if I go, like, if I went to a health food store and I bought a pretty high quality New Zealand whey grass-fed, vanilla protein powder, it's like the difference between table salt and really high quality salt. The table salt burns your tongue. The high quality salt almost tastes sweet by comparison. When I take a commercial, you're a commercial brand also, but if I take a traditional protein powder and put it against yours, it's so sweet. The other one is so sweet. Yours has the Puori has a much cleaner, it's the best way for me to describe it. It just has a very clean taste profile and it's just not over sweetened, which is uncommon.
And you can always add, it is uncommon, but you can always add, like, it's easier to add, like, let's say some strawberries or, half a banana or whatever you want, a little spoon of honey, or, if you're blending it into your smoothie, if you want to add that. Again, we're not against carbs either, like, and especially like, let's say post a workout or any other thing, you want some carbohydrates, right? So, I think taking as simple, minimal, like quality natural ingredients coming from good origin. And that's the last thing I'll add to it. So Puori, it's a contraction of pure origin. So that's kind of the whole idea, is that Puori is hard to pronounce. For some people, like, well, how am I spelling this? What is that? Sounds like a Scandinavian word in some way. And it is a made up word, but it comes from pure origin, right? So, and that's the goal with these ingredients. We test them. We find, like, the origins around the world where we can find the purest, highest quality ingredients from the ingredient nerds out there that cares about everything from animal welfare to, quality of plants and so on. And that's where we start. And most time you get a high quality ingredient. Again, we run it through our labs. We don't want to be, let's say, ingredient biased of saying, oh, this has to come from Denmark because Denmark is sound pure and clean, because it might not necessarily be that way. Maybe southern Spain is much better for this, or, Mexico or US, or wherever it comes from, that ingredient. We want to base that on the data at the end of the day, and then having that quality of that pure origin starting point. So that's kind of the main thing in, like, the protein powder. So it's something you can consume and feel good about consuming on a daily basis. And to kind of round that up on protein in general. So if I didn't have any data, I didn't have the, Puori product myself, I would go with a vanilla based whey protein with as minimal sweeteners in there as possible. That would be my choice. Like, that's from a perspective of not knowing what's actually in products out there. Based on macro data, it looks like vanilla is a very clean ingredient to add as a flavor component. Whey is superior on the purity side to the different plant proteins out there.
Yeah. Although you do have a plant protein, which again has been tested and formulated to.
And it's one that our supply chain thinks a really high, like, hard product to keep in market, because, like, we got to have that test in place when we get the peas in. We need to test them before we start working with them, because, there's variation in the batches. So
yeah, for sure. I have a question for you. Do you think as it becomes harder and harder to source clean, you know, heavy metal free, toxin free starting materials. Do you think there's going to be, do you know if there's any work being done in, is there a way to clean up a product that's not optimal? Like, is anybody doing any work in that? Like, I wonder
Yeah,
if,
how
like,
can
what
I?
if we got to the point where it just became really hard to source clean products? Do you think there's going to be a play in the industry of trying to understand, is there a way to remove heavy
Oh,
metals from?
I would say there's definitely a play in the industry for that. And I hope that somebody's, as we are talking already, looking into it. And I would say there's people on our team that would be much better equipped than answering that are deep into our supply chain and the product team, the science team. So I
Mhm.
see myself more as a consumer, to be honest.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
am the consumer. I am a pretty nerdy and I have the things I wanted my way, obviously. And sometimes annoying consumer, I would guess. But
Well, that's what makes you good at what you do.
like that's what drives forward. Also a personal need. But I think to your point, there's definitely ways and there's definitely things we can do. And again, if we start by highlighting the product, then mapping out where we can see the issues are, then setting in some rules for not having, like, not, like think of how counterintuitive this is. You go down to your local, high quality grocer, whether it's Whole Foods or Sprouts or wherever, you buy the most expensive, like organic even. We also saw organic in general tested high on heavy metals. So
Yeah.
again, organic means that there is less pesticides and also it can be some of the welfare if it's an animal. There can be other good things that I would always pick an organic over a non-organic if I could.
Hmm.
But on a protein side, and like on the product side, organic doesn't mean testing for heavy metals.
No.
So that
Yeah.
doesn't give me that knowledge point. But I think that's you know yeah, I'm like I kind of lost where I came from, but
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
you can.
Well, I
Uh,
was talking about removing removing the elements that are problematic
so I
from.
totally think that that's like if again now we're putting that attention in there, and thank you
Yeah.
for wheeling me back there. Yeah, I think there's ways to do it, and like we know, let's say if we look at the other big ways where you should really be concerned or aware, you shouldn't be scared in any way, but like look at the big things that you're consuming in life: oxygen, water, some of the big things. Those are also where you want to look at the purity. Look how we've been able to, let's say, purify water through different distillation filtration
Yeah. Reverse
processes.
osmosis. Yeah.
Exactly, we can do
Yeah.
that. We can,
Hmm.
I'm sure we can do that in the same way for the soil without being the expert on it and knowing the detail. But my point is, like with oxygen, with water, we're able to do certain things. Let's do that again with the crops. And again, when we know where the issues are, let's start there so we don't become like, over concerned or greenwashing on, let's test for everything, because we also see some of our products. And now again, we rely on the Clean Label Project or IFOS or some of the other, like credible people behind setting what are we actually testing for.
Hmm.
But we don't want to just test for everything if it's not there. That's a waste of money and time as well.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
so like that, we need that research first. We need to understand where it's going. That's where, even though they can be scary and hard for industries, but I love these industry studies where like nonprofits go out and do some research and we can get some data points. And then from there, we can try to do better
Yeah.
afterwards.
No, I think that's great. And I think the Clean Label Project it's one of those organizations that it's like the environmental working group. Like EWG has
Ex-
achieved a very high level of visibility to the consumer, and they've grown to the point where they're testing everything from household cleaning products to personal care products to foods. Like they're
That's
all encompassing. And I think the Clean Label Project is yet another one. And what's interesting about the label is, you keep hearing from people, look, just because it has a stamp on the label, like there's games people play with this stuff, unfortunately, with
unfortunately.
companies. And they can they can skirt regulations. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's identifying the companies and the brands that are willing to
Yeah,
offer full transparency to the consumer so that we know what we're consuming. Everybody gets to make a choice, right? I
exactly.
mean, it's everybody
But
gets to choose, but we should be able to make that choice with information rather than trying to trust a bunch of stamps on a bottle.
It's data points. I think we
Yeah.
will, when we get a little further out in the future and we look back and say, wow, did you just, I think there's many things you will say wow to for sure. And we probably did that when we were looking back, but, and again, we only have what we have, but I think we would look back and say, wow, it's crazy that you bought like something that was supposedly healthy and you were getting like 5 times the amount of lead in a serving of this
Sure.
without knowing, like, did we really do that? You know, we will find ways, and that's the beauty of humankind as well. We, generally trying to do good, right, out there.
Yeah.
So,
and resourceful.
and resourceful. Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think fish oil is that product now.
Oh,
like
for
we
sure.
look back, and I think that the fish oil industry probably, for the most part, unless someone's just shooting for the bottom of the barrel here, like they've had to up-level their game because there was so much of a problem. And I think there's still probably a shocking number of things
I'm
out there.
I'm doing a little bit of smiling and a little bit of if you could
Yeah.
see, but I think they're still on the oxidation side and, treating it as like a byproduct of something else and not being too focused, but like the actual quality of what you're trying to get at the end of the day. But again,
actually, I have a question for you on the fish oil that I forgot to ask earlier. What fish are you using?
only anchovies at the moment. So
the smallest little guys, right?
The smallest little guys in the food chain, which accumulate. Also, the fattiest fish like sardines, anchovies, and those type have a higher omega-3 content. But also they're small in the food chain. We use something that is also friend of the sea certified, meaning the areas we fish from, they will never overfish. There's no bycatching. They're like regulated fishery processes under that. And then again, trying to get those like fast reproductive fish so that you don't have a big impact on the environment.
Well, also as smaller fish, they don't bioaccumulate toxins the same
Exactly.
way, right?
So you have the
I think that
purest
also
product.
It gives you a better shot at getting a cleaner product right out of the gate.
For sure. If you're going larger like salmon and so on, like you already have some accumulation coming up. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, Oliver, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We did.
Is there anything we left out?
No, I think like if there's a takeaway for the listeners to take with them, like on the purity side, and I'm sure you've had a lot of different guests talking about this as well, but look at the stuff that you're either consuming or doing in larger doses on a daily basis, right? Like like if you're looking for purity in protein, when you're consuming up to like 30, 40 grams or 20 grams, like obviously that might be the content of the protein, but the serving can be higher. That's where you want to start by, choosing something where you have the data points. So that's where I would start. Things that I'm doing on a regular basis. And there's other sides where it's not as much as a worry. So that would be it. If I don't have the data, like for myself, so I love dark chocolate as well. We talked about that earlier, but dark chocolate can also be your treat at night in your chocolate bar, your whatever, 75, 80% concentration chocolate, whatever you're consuming. But I don't have the data on if there's lead or cadmium in my chocolate bar, and I am actually consuming it. So what I am doing is I'm actually rotating. So I'm buying different brand. That's how sophisticated we got in this day of time. But to the point is, if you don't have access to, let's say, the organic, the like I would rotate, so I didn't get the exact same. I would try to get something that like. It doesn't have like you can have local, whether it's farmers or so on in that side where you can get high quality that's not organic, but I would pick organic if I could. And then I think coming back to where we started, with proteins as well, really try to pick the highest quality product out there when it's something you're consuming on a daily basis.
Yeah, 100%. So why don't we leave the audience with this? What are 3 things, no matter what brand you buy, 3 things you need to look for in your protein powder? Start with that.
I'll start with that. So I would say, if I don't know what brand I buy, I would go for whey protein. And you can talk about concentrate, isolate, and so on. I wouldn't dive into that right now. If it could be a high quality whey protein with pasture raised, grass fed, that type of style, I would look at the flavoring. So I would go with vanilla or non-flavored, maybe even strawberry if that's more your thing. I think those are cleaner flavors when you look at purity. And then I would look at sweeteners. What type of sweeteners do I prefer having? Is it is it monk fruit stevia in that? And then I can have like no carbs, or do I actually want it to be more natural and from a little bit of carbs? That's dependent on preferences as well.
Great. And then let's do that for fish oil. What are 3 things consumers should be looking for in their fish oil?
Active omega-3 content, so EPA, DHA, because some products may have a 30% concentration fish oil. So if they say you can't judge serving size on fish oil, you got to look at omega-3, so EPA, DHA, so count that up. You might actually see that the quote unquote expensive product like a Puori fish oil might actually not be that expensive when you compare to how much omega-3 you're getting from a 30%. It might actually be same price or even cheaper. So that's one thing. The second thing is now we talk purity. So if there's any kind of purity, like an IFOS logo, IFOS is fairly out there. You can get the heavy metals reports and so on. And then finally, freshness, like oxidation. And you won't get that number necessarily. Then I would chew in a capsule. And if it's like I'm dying of fishy taste afterwards because of that, like crazy, maybe rancid fish oil, then I would not use the product. But if you could actually chew a capsule, and chew a capsule and eat a little food. It's like taking a spoon of olive oil can burn your throat a little bit if you just do that. You need to have some food with it. But chew a capsule, a little food. If the fishiness taste disappears with the food, it might be fresh. So there's a better chance that it's fresh. If it hangs in your mouth and you're like, it's not getting off, it could be rancid.
You have a problem.
Yeah.
Actually, one last question for you is: do you have a timeline that you're getting the fish oil to the shelf from the time it's produced?
We definitely have that in our supply chain. I don't have it exact of how fast and quick it is, so I don't want to say something that's
part
not
of your
accurate.
process.
It's totally like we're trying to minimize like oxygen exposure, all the different touch point from where it's getting caught to it end up with the end consumer is something that we are looking into and optimizing.
Great. Oliver, this has been great. Why don't we tell people where they can find more information? And I know you have a great website with some good information there also on the Clean Label Project. So maybe direct people to the website, and if social media and everywhere else they can find.
Yeah, Puori.com, if you can spell that, Puori.com. And then you can find everything from there, whether it's like Instagram or website or wherever you prefer to kind of, drive around. But I would start there. And, then if you have some products you're consuming at home that you're in doubt, reach out to the brands and ask for data. That's another way to get the brands to think about this and get them to move in the right direction. So, there's definitely things I still want to know, like when I'm buying rice or dark chocolate and so on. So, and I could be better at reaching out to the brands. I've done a lot of that in the past, but Puori.com is a great resource for that.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. Like, don't be afraid to reach out to brands, guys, because getting stonewalled is your first bad sign, right? They should be willing to engage with you. And folks, if you decide that you want to give your Puori products a try, which I recommend that you do, you can even get a chocolate protein powder because the chocolate's tested. You can just use code NAT and you get a really nice 20% off with that.
Yeah.
So Oliver, thank you so much for your time and for your work in this industry. I think you're leading the charge in many ways in that full transparency trend. Well, I won't even call it a trend, the full transparency direction that we kind of need to go in at this point. So thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. So we're just getting started. So
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.